My name is Brent Ives. I've got an entry slide for me. I'm an organizational consultant to special districts, and I have been for 19 years. And we specialize in, well, a lot of things, so you can't say we specialize too much, I suppose. But do a lot of things regarding boards and governance and how the public gets served in this forum. Each week I'm with a different board. It seems that's been the case since I've been working in this field. Prior to that, I was an engineering technical manager at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and also got a little bit of education in organizational development. Another key point is I've served on your side of the dais for 23 years myself as a city council member in the city of Tracy, which is 90,000 people in the Central Valley. You probably remember when Tracy was 15,000 people in the Central Valley. It's 90,000 people now in Tracy. I turned out in 2014. I was the mayor 8 years prior to that, and naturally many local and regional boards and commissions like this one that we were designated to be part of and designated to represent those that that we in our area designated to serve for a particular mission. I'm also got to write a book of my collective thoughts in 52 ways to be a better board. What that is the idea was one a week, so that you could absorb, so anyone that's serving on a board can absorb the lessons, the 52 lessons that are in there. It just, after a while, it just said I've got to write it down somewhere, and so I did that in that book, and it's available on Amazon. I'm not selling books, I'm just wanted to tell you that's where that's at. And much of what I talk about here is a CSDA curriculum. It's important for you to know that you're in a CSDA class now, kind of, with a trainer. I trained the CSDA classes in this class all the time. And it's just we don't often get to do it in this form. Usually it's at a conference or it's at a y'all come training somewhere, and you guys will sit in a classroom for a whole day and get 6 hours of training. And then your district qualifies for District of Distinction, which is what was the scope of the intent here, is for me to be able to give you all that training. In order to qualify for that, a majority of you have to have sat through the 6 hours of training. In this case, what we're going to do is in 4 hour-and-a-half increments, maybe for the next 4 meetings, depending on how that works out. But somehow we're going to have to work out so a majority of you get this 6 hours of training. The binders are a collection of, yes, many of these slides that you'll see tonight. Not all, we're not going to go through the whole book tonight. We go through about half of it. But there's also some other lessons sprinkled within it. And so you're getting the Governance Foundations Training Plus, and the Plus is other training that will allow you to, that 6 hours to occur. In other words, there's some extra things from me in here. The CSDA has been fine with that, because I've worked with CSDA for a number of years and really had quite a hand in putting this curriculum together in the first place. So I've been, over the years, been able to collect different lessons, different ways of expressing governance concepts. And this is an interesting challenge, not for me, but for you. For anybody who comes and serves a region from a particular area, such as if you're on a city council, if you're a member of the public that's designated by a council or by a board of supervisors, and then you come here as kind of a tertiary, another responsibility. Some of you, this is your primary board that you're on. But the challenge of it is, how do we represent the nearly 760,000 people with this mission? And I can tell you right from the start, All my training, all CSDA's training is very mission-centric. The reason the public's money gets raked into a pile for this agency to spend is that mission. At least it should be, and you've been over that. You've reviewed that mission. I was here when you did it. And I know that you are committed to that mission. How does that then work in the decision-making process? How do the public, the large group, the whole region get best served in this form of government? And so that's what we're going to talk about. To me, at first, I thought when I started this business, I started talking more about policy and governance and the way it should work and the way you see it doesn't work. And I've experienced boards that I've been on that they fought more than they really worked out their differences. And classically, this is an arranged marriage at best. We all come from different viewpoints, different perspectives, different ideals, different. That's both the challenge of it and the beauty of it. And so this is what we're going to talk about, is some of those great ideas of how this form of government can serve the 750,000. So as we do that, I want you to know that that the slide deck order will change. Next time I come in November, I will have more slides, and we'll look at our binders and we'll get them open. We'll slide those in because it will be woven into the foundations training. So while I know some of you have you have slide numbers on there, those are probably going to be obsolete by even this meeting. They're going to be obsolete. So just stay with this. There's going to be, it's being filmed, recorded, not filmed. It's being recorded. I can't get that out of my head. It's being recorded. We will. When the slide deck after the 4 trainings that we do is complete with all of the additional stuff, it'll be electronically available to all of you. This is the stuff you've got before you in the binder is really a reminder, a review of a lot of the things that are in the standard basic foundations course. It's going to be informal. If you need to get up and stand around, go get a drink, come out, use the restroom, whatever you need to do, please don't feel like you're just glued to your chair. I'll probably keep talking so that I don't keep you here too long, and I don't, quite frankly, go over that 90 minutes. I think it'll be about right, but you never know. You know, we should talk about some of these things. You should have discussion on your role as a board member here. And so I'm going to ask some questions, and there are going to be some, there's bound to be some disagreement in how we see this role, or some concept or a way of looking at it that perhaps you hadn't looked at before. Please feel free to raise your hands. Let's talk about it. Please ask questions, and we'll go from there. So, woven within the governance foundations will be policy making, communications, and thinking about the future strategically. All those things are important to you. They're important to every board, quite frankly. All of them can be challenges. There's lots of ways of doing this, and so this is our long-term agenda, as we will cover governance foundations along with these topics. So in this training tonight, and we're only going to get part of the way through it, but I'll go ahead and go down through. Is introductions, and I will ask you, if you don't mind, to introduce yourself to me very quickly as we go through, so I'll know a little more about you. And then a program overview and expectations. That's what we're doing now. What are boards and how did they get here? Why think about governance? How do boards achieve unity of purpose? Process and steps your board can take to build unity of purpose, qualities and skills of effective directors, and how boards carry out their missions effectively. We're going to stop somewhere in here tonight, and then next time we get together, we're going to go through some more of that. The Leadership Academy itself is something, this is the first course of the Leadership Academy for individual board members. There are 4 courses in that. Each of them is nearly a day long. So to get a academy certification for each board member, you go through other classes that add to it to make the whole academy. And so there's foundations, there's setting directions, there's the board member and HR, and the board member and finances. All those courses are available to you. This one will include the foundations only, so I would certainly urge you to think about that, and you can ask me later how you get those. So the goal of that CSDA Governance Academy is back in the days of the Little Hoover Commission, the first time. They said, look, special districts are just kind of running out there unfettered, doing things, spending public money without any kind of control or any kind of layer of regulations on it. And so one of the things that CSDA did at the time, and CSDA was really in its infancy in terms of how relative to how evolved it is now. One of the things that CSDA did was say, let's put together an academy. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that group that sat for endless hours in Sacramento thinking about what it means to be a good board member in these times, and that was back in the early 90s. And so it has evolved since then, but it really is a good question. It doesn't matter if you're thinking about your service to the public at any level of government. How you serve should be a prime question in your mind. Who and how and when and why, all those questions. This is really about the how you serve and how it should work and how the public gets the biggest bang from its buck from you as you sit as their board. Then the key components, the 4 stages of learning and so forth, and those are all part of the course today. So the idea, the goal is to provide special district board members with the knowledge skills that will enable them to better understand their role in the district and function as an effective governance team. Don't let that term go by. That's an important term. Whether you like it or not, you are a team. People from outside of here, people, when they think of the Mosquito Vector Control District, they think, well, there are some people that are representatives of ours there, and they get appointed from different bodies, and those people help make the decisions, set the direction. They manage the manager who manages the staff. They have that all worked out, right? Now, I don't know how many people drive by on this particular road, but when they drive by here, they look over at the sign on occasion, and they think, I suppose those people are in there working it out, doing the best they can for the public. I suppose they're in there planning. I suppose they're in there working out the broad level of spectrum of need from one end of the district to the other. I suppose that's what they're doing. And that's what they expect. We've got to ask ourselves as elected or appointed officials, we've got to ask ourselves, what is fair for the public to expect of us once we put that mantle on, once we accept that position? What is fair for them to expect of us? So we provide perspective too. See, the individual perspectives of a board is the beauty of it when it's working well. When that can get off the rails, as you might imagine, but each of us having a different way of looking at any decision can perfect correct that decision, can make it better, but only if there's a process that allows, only if we engage, only if we're willing to get involved in making this better, and we're able to have discourse and debate and not always make it dysfunctional. I don't know I doubt if there are any agencies in the county that have, in the two counties, that have any problems with that, where their boards are dysfunctional, where their boards are so upset with one another that if somebody votes yes, they're going to vote no. It doesn't matter what it is. I know there are some. I know that it's a shame when it happens. It's hard when it happens. It's not always bad, but it's most usually bad, because who loses in that discussion is that two, perhaps one or two perspectives get marginalized. And once those perspectives are marginalized, then the public gets less served. And so there's reason to think about how we serve, how we interact, the processes that we use to make decisions, to set direction, to manage our executive. All those things are, and to watch the finances, all those things are clearly in our wheelhouse, in our role. How we do it, though, is always the great variable in the equation. So the prime, I always think, and I thought now after serving, wow, well over 10,000 hours in a publicly elected position, I think that the public is best served when we work as a governance team to protect and advance the mission, the particular mission that was set forth for this group in 1915. And so it may have changed a little bit here and there over the years with the different kinds of things you've got to mitigate, but we're going to talk a little bit about how important, how critical it is for board members to understand and work together around the unity of purpose of that. Now, we've got to talk about that, but we'll have time. So, applied training and interaction, I'm still kind of introducing the whole course here. All 4 courses must be taken to earn the individual academy certification for you to complete. That's the other academy. Additional electives can be taken. General managers are encouraged to participate in the program. It's always good to have you both together. And then that's me, CSGA training faculty. District will qualify for CSGA District of Distinction with 6 hours of training for the majority of the board. So that's kind of where we're headed. All right. So let's kind of start with this. This is Maslow proposed this way back in the day. Excuse me. Think about the 4 different consciousnesses here. Unconscious incompetence. Now, it happens. We don't know that we don't know. We just don't know. We're unconscious. Conscious incompetence, we know that we don't know. Conscious competence is we work what we don't know, we try to get better at. And then unconscious competence is where you get to the point where we don't have to think about it anymore. It's just a natural thing for you. Think about riding a bike. How many of you can still ride a bike and it's a natural thing for you? Well, when you first watched your big brother or sister or somebody else ride a bike, you said, I want to do that. But you didn't know that you couldn't do that yet. But you wanted to do it. So you were unconscious incompetent. Then you went to the conscious incompetence. You were able to try, but you weren't very good at it. Then you worked at it to get to work really hard to get to the point where you could ride the bike, and then it became to that. It's like driving a car. I remember a time when I had a surgery and I hadn't driven a car in months, maybe 3 or 4 months. And I got in the car and I said, I remembered when I put that key in the ignition, I said, I haven't driven in 3 or 4 months. But that didn't mean I couldn't drive. It didn't mean I had any problems with it at all. It was just there. It's that muscle memory. So can boards be this way? Can board members be there? If you're a brand new board member, you've never served in a representative office before, you can easily be down here. And so the idea is the learning stages are important. This is a key to it right here. The kinds of things we're doing in this course is we're trying to get to the level where we're working here on things, golly, I didn't even know that. Wow, I know that, now I need to get good at it. Wow, look at that, I'm so good at it. It's just, now, good at is a relative term in board work, right? In sitting on a city council, in making a decision as a county supervisor. It's a relative term, doing it well. And so we need to talk about when we're serving, who we're serving as well. What motivates what are our decision filters? And what motivates those filters to every decision that comes in front of us? And you have to admit that every time you pick up a board packet now, you kind of start thumbing through the agenda and you look at the items that are on the agenda. They're going to be before you. And you kind of begin applying decision filters to it. Is this going to mean spending money? Is this going to mean, is this something that we hadn't seen before? Is this going to be an application of something in a different way that we've never considered? All those things start going through your mind. Unless you're new and you don't even know to ask those questions yet. You just say, oh, that's interesting. I guess I'll find out more about that. But those kinds of things become natural to us over the years. And we apply these decision filters, and then you have to kick in the other kinds of questions that really consider what's best for this. What best serves. Now, let me just read it to you real quick so we don't bypass. And I don't know if all of you can see it, but it says the Marin-Sonoma Mosquito and Vector Control District, founded in 1915, protects the health and welfare of the communities it serves from mosquitoes and vector-borne diseases by utilizing cost-effective, environmentally responsible, integrated vector management practices. To the person that's driving by out here, they say, I'm so glad those people are in there engaged in that, because I don't want to engage in it. What do they want? They want to be sure that somebody's doing that. That's what they wanted in 1915 and even before 1915. They wanted that because it was a mess. That's why you're under the public health code, is because it was a health mess. And so doing what you do is critical, and how to assure that the mission that started in 1915 is good in 2018 and going to be good in 2048 is the challenge. The consistent handing off of the mission from 1915 to today, 103 years later. So, what are boards and how did they get here? Well, maybe most of you know this, and while you have all been sent here by someone, by some group, it's a fact that now you're here, as I said, to get pushed together to make decisions. This is a good time for you to tell me who you are and where you're from, and kind of a little bit about your background. It'd be helpful for me to know if you're on another board or if you're from a city council or what. So if you could just make it brief, we'll go around real quick. And if you don't mind, I'll start right here. Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, my name's Ken Blair. I'm from the town of Windsor. I'm the representative of Windsor. I am have not really been sent here. You're choosing, and I'm not on another board or anything like that.
And who appointed you? Did somebody appoint you to the district? I mean, did the city council or the town council there appoint you to this?
No. I just noticed an opening and I was interested in serving on a commission on the board.
Okay. Somebody probably appointed you. Maybe it was a county supervisor or it was the town council there. Is it a town or city, Windsor?
It's a town.
It's a town. Anyway, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
don't know why I'm here. But
Thank you.
that's how I got here.
You know why? Thank you for serving. Thank you. Not like I said. While there are how many of you here tonight? Don, 14. 13 here tonight. There's 747,987 that aren't. I'm sorry. 85 that aren't. And a couple more. But think about that ratio. That's incredible. And they're entrusting you all with that. Please.
My name is Dustin DiMatteo, appointed by City Council of Cotati. I work in a nonprofit called Daily X that does some landscaping, rain catchment, gray water systems. So we work a lot with water and wanted to become more familiar with the district's practices and best practices
Water.
in general.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very nice connection there. Please.
I'm Pamela Harlem, and I'm here representing San Rafael. I've been on the board for a couple of years. This is my first foray into public service of this kind. This is the only board that I'm on, and I'm
Great.
here for San Rafael.
Again, thank you so much for your service. Please.
I'm Susan Hootkins, and I was appointed by the Petaluma City Council to this position. I applied for it, so it wasn't completely out of the dark. Professionally, I do CEQA compliance for vector control districts, and I help this district do their programmatic EIR and their entire program.
How tidy.
Yes, so I know the details. Bill didn't have to train me in. I know all the stuff they do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I'm Sean McCaffrey. I'm from Healdsburg. I'm on the city council up there. I have been since 2012. I've served on a few other boards across countywide and statewide. I've been on this board since 2013.
Thanks, Sean. Please.
Lori Gallion. I am from the city of Sonoma. I was appointed. At the time I started with the district, I was on council. Have been a council member 2008 to 2016 and also mayor. I have an environmental focus, and to me this was very much in environmental. For me, I've served on many county committees in water, climate authority, transportation, budget. It just seemed a good place to be.
Indeed.
I still enjoy the work after I left office, and I serve on 4 other boards that are also, for the most part, nonprofit boards.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Tamara?
Tamara Davis. I've been on a wide variety of boards and commissions. I've been on the city council. I currently am on the Vector Control JPA. My reason for getting involved in this is because my father had mosquito-borne encephalitis, in which he was extremely ill. He did not die at that time, but it definitely shortened his life. So I know the impact that the health part of this can have.
Yeah.
So I'm passionate about the mission.
Thank you, Tamara. Please.
Hi, Carol Giovanotto. I was appointed by the city of Cloverdale. I live in Cloverdale. I retired last year after 41 years in local government, in city management. And I've served for 17 years, currently serve on a fire district board, and I also serve on a statewide fire workers' comp board.
Very nice.
They did not have any representation in North County for the electric control, so wanting to do something for my community, I stepped up and volunteered to be a part of this board.
Very nice. Thank you so much.
Harry Powell, I represent West Marin, and I've been on the Chamber of Commerce Board and the Chamber
Very nice. Thank you so much.
Art Dyke, I'm appointed by the city of Santa Rosa. I also serve on other boards and commissions. I'm an environmental consultant, and I have my own business.
Very nice. Please.
I'm Nina Glass. I'm on the city council in the city of Sebastopol. I was mayor last year. I serve on several other nonprofit boards. I owned an accounting software development company for 25 years, so I know a bit about finance and accounting, which I think is helpful to all the boards that I'm on. My city is very concerned about environmental responsibility, and that's part of why I'm here.
Sure.
For this extremely excellent district that also takes care of people's health.
It's a bonus. Please.
My name is Paul Segas. I was appointed by the town council Ross. I volunteered for a reason I don't know, but it was, I think I've heard that mosquitoes are by far the most dangerous animal to humans. And I think public health is important, and I have no other experience with boards, although I've founded 2 companies. I've been on many board meetings. But
Those boards. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please.
Run Chief Cush. I was appointed by the Town Council of San Anselmo. I volunteered for the position because I run a research and consulting organization that works on public health and development challenges in the developing world. And I like the overlap between the mission of this district with the work that I do professionally.
Yeah.
I sit on one other board for an educational nonprofit.
Very nice. Thank you so much. You see all the differing, it's easy to think, golly, you put all that power, all that perspective, all that knowledge into a room, and you aim it at that mission. And if it's, it's the synergy of the group, or it can be the differences in the way that our styles, and the way that we communicate, and the way that we handle our concern or our disagreements can mean that it diminishes from that duty cycle, so to speak. And so it's really interesting that, and I appreciate. Herb, did I let you introduce? Gosh, I just went and I forgot. Herb, please. Not that you don't know him.
Herb Rowland, farmer, lawyer, appointed by Ed Schultz.
See, I thought somebody.
And this is my first board experience.
Okay. Now you're the chair. Yeah, congratulations. Chair's got a special role, right? Those of you that have been chairs before, you realize how you kind of step into the middle and you say, wow, now what am I supposed to have an opinion, or am I supposed to just facilitate the discussion, or should I keep the factions from warring with one another? How do I act here? Sometimes the chair can be a real interesting position, and I think that we ought to always appreciate those who are willing to not only step up once, but step up again and lead those leaders. But when you think about the collective of Marin Sonoma, how many people there are here, we kind of call that, but how many elected officials or appointed officials are there? Maybe 150, maybe 200 out of all those people. You all are leaders in these counties. Like it or not, your name's out there. When there's a publication that goes out from this district that requires the listing of the board, when you go onto the website, you're there. So you're leaders in these counties, and that's why when people come to this podium, regardless of what whether they're talking about very particular issues or issues that aren't even particular to the mission, that's what they need. They need to express to their leaders. They need to be able to engage in, and that's the beauty of the special district, is the locality of it, is that they can get to you, they can talk to you. And I don't know here, I know mayor and city managers and others and council members, when you go to the store, people know you. and they want to bend your ear, and they mostly usually just want to be listened to. And I don't know if that happens much in the mosquito vector control district. On occasion, people will say, well, don't you represent us on the mosquito vector? And so when an issue comes up, you're maybe right in the middle of that leadership role, and then it may not come up again for years. But it's so important for us as leaders to be able to show in those 4 different areas of learning that, hey, none of us have completely arrived at that higher box. So we're so unconscious to the consciousness of doing this. It's just like riding a bike. It's not. You never know what's going to be the next thing that could get in front of you. You never know what somebody might bring to the table. What staff is out there. Well, you think you've seen everything? Well, look at this. Someone from the public will bring something you'd never thought about before. A new angle, a new way of looking. In the experience of the large group, you've got, it all kind of synthesizes right here. It all kind of gets condensed into this place. And so how important is it that that happens? And while that's happening, and while you're saying, okay, that happened, now what are we going to do about it? When you're making that decision is when those perspectives really get utilized. Get informed, get polished, that decision. And that demands process. You've got to have process that allows that. And you all have worked on it. I have to say, I've worked with a lot of mosquito vector control districts. I've worked with hundreds of districts across the state, but not many of them seemingly care as much as you do. I'm not just blowing smoke here. Not collectively, for you all to do this is a big deal. Because I don't think anybody else is doing it. If they were, I'd know. So I have to hand it to you. You're all willing to get into a room and you know, over a period of time, spend 6 hours with me to talk about things that mostly just policy and governance wonks talk about. It's pretty impressive. Whether it be your policy manual or your planning or your working, you all care deeply about this. And I tell you, your community should appreciate it. And so let's talk a little bit more about the governance team, because you're a team. Like I said, you're leaders, you're some of the ones. It all starts with the public, though. Remember, everything in here, the tables, the chairs, the carpet, the lights, everything in there belongs to them. They are the owners. We are a fractional owner. Yes, you all, I'm not. You all are fractional owners of this. But they, the collective, the large group, are the owners. And so in every decision, should we not represent the owners? That was not rhetorical. You can answer that. Should we not represent the owners in every decision that comes before us? Yeah, of course we should. So let's keep that. So it all starts with them. It's all there. This is their mission. If we do this right, they might not hear from us very often. But if we do this wrong, you might hear from them quite often. Your district started about 1915. There was some different kinds of improvement districts and improvement groups and things. People were trying to get it together before 1950. And in 1915, of course, the state enacted, and it all came together, and it was allowed for counties and cities or counties to drag money out of a tax base and be able to serve this kind of a mission. So a community or region that has a need, there was a need, and its members want services to fill that need. So they do that by initiating local government to provide that service. It's mission, and they set people aside to do that, and they said, okay, now go out and get that done somehow. Please see to it that we don't have that problem for very much longer. Then they delegate the responsibility and authority to a board of trustees, board members, to carry out their mission. establishing and then overseeing the new local government's activities, and that's what you do. That's what your role is. And there are lots of different stripes in that, lots of different aspects of it and pieces of that. But a board is given responsibility to carry out the mission by establishing and then overseeing a new, like we said, and raise revenue, set rules, and do what is needed. And so you're accountable. When you say, yes, I will serve, you put on this target that says, yes, I'm accountable. You can take it up with me. I am here to represent you. No different than anybody else in any other layer of government. You, for that mission, you are the Senate. You are the House Rules Committee. You are the governor, collectively. So it's accountability. The state of being responsible, liable, answerable to the public. Wow, okay. I wish you would have told me before I... No, but really, this is a big piece of it. All accountability, responsibility, and authority is vested in the board of directors. Boards are accountable to the public for the performance of the district. That is a big task. Because when you think about this, it gets down to this word here, protect. Not terribly forgiving. I mean, it doesn't take long for there to be a case of Zika or West Nile or something that it doesn't go from the large to the quick focus into this district, right? I mean, laser focus, just like that. And so this protection is what you do, and you're accountable for that protection. There is an author named John Carver, and he is an author that has written on boards for years. And he's kind of responsible for a lot of different sayings in terms of how boards should act. But what the board's job in his mind is to identify what results are wanted for what people at what cost. What results are wanted for what people at what cost. And so that's an important thing for you to keep in mind. Because what results, well, kind of this. We want these results. What people, well, we kind of have that assigned too, don't we? The 700, the large group, right? Then the hard part, at what cost? And I tell you, that is a tough one to figure. It's not easy. That's one of the hardest parts of this job. It's always to know and feel comfortable and feel confident that you are doing this, and you even say it in your mission statement. I don't know if you can see it. I want everybody to be able to see that. By utilizing cost-effective and environmentally responsible, I'll leave that, practices. Cost-effective and environmentally responsible practices. And so, oftentimes people get involved because of the different kinds of backgrounds that you have for different pieces of this. The environment came up, finances came up, mosquitoes came up, disease came up, right? Water and the integration of all the issues around and how water really works in the big scheme of things from the time it comes, it may come to a lot of different, comes up, goes down, from the time it gets here to the time it goes away effectively, and what happens within that whole process, he knows. Thinks about it all the time. Yeah, you got to think about it. I do. So this what costs and how it all works is one of the big challenges for us. The first two aren't terribly challenging, are they? Doesn't seem like it. Sometimes what people can be challenging, who you really represent, and that's a big question. We're going to talk about that. So, the ways the board works together is called governance. And so, the way that you work together, it defines the governance of how this district works. And you can see here that in most other relationships, we have practice and history knowing what to do and how to make it work. We have precedents. We have things that are laid out before us, and we know how it works. Partnerships, friends, business partners, spouses, some siblings. We have history. We have precedent. Hierarchical relationships with boss and workers and military teams and coaches and parents and children. Those relationships are pretty straightforward. Most people have little familiarity with the working of a collaborative group of 7 or 9 or 24. You see, what can happen with a group of 24, it can be quite different than what happens in a group of 5, or certainly what happens when you're just making unilateral decisions at home. I don't know how many of you get to make unilateral decisions at home, but I mean, if you were, and unilateral decisions anywhere, it doesn't seem to be the case any longer. But the point is that with 24 of you, you have the great opportunity to make very, very well-informed decisions. You also have the great challenge of being able to somehow process decisions with 24 different viewpoints, or slightly different viewpoints. Not always. Slightly different perspectives, slightly different backgrounds, slightly different viewpoints. So it's not easy. I remember when I was appointed to the city council the first time. A person moved out of the city, and I was on the planning commission, and I gave my speech in front of the council like maybe some others have done, and I was one of 22 people or something like that, and they selected me. Now, I distinctly remember that night because it was a council meeting night. And at that very moment, they say, okay, come up here and get sworn in office. And I could not have had any color left in my face. You mean right now? I'm going to go up there right now? Yeah, come up here right now. And they say, okay, here's agenda item number 4. That was agenda item number 3. Then I started making decisions for, it was 40,000 people at the time. And it just kind of washed over me the responsibility that I had at that time. And how interesting it can be when you understand what representation means. At the same time, I had to figure out what these other 4 were going to do. What's it going to be like to work with them? On there, I had a mayor, I had a future mayor, a future state assembly person, and a future congressman. It was like this powerful group of people that I was joining. And I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done to myself? How could I have put myself in this position? And some people, some good friends and mentors of mine told me at the time, Brent, it's your perspective that's important. It doesn't matter where you come from. You're a member of the public just like anyone else. You've had time with the Parks and Rec Commission. You had time in the Planning Commission. You've had perspective and viewpoint in the community. You've grown up in this community. You can serve just as effectively as anyone else. But that didn't mean I knew how it worked. You know how it is. You feel like, wow, I guess I should just vote along with everyone else? Interesting concept. In a group of 24, how does that work? Most of the times, it just kind of works. It just kind of goes on. It just, anyone wanting to discuss this? It's a little harder because of the size of the group to feel like, okay, I'm the one that's going to slow this thing up a little bit because I've got to ask some questions. I've got some perspective I want to add. I want before we make this decision, can we hear this from our general manager, from someone out in the field? And after a while, it gets a little old. people start saying, well, we know who's going to ask a question on this one. Or when finances come up, somebody will say, well, we know who's going to stop the presses here. That's okay. See, I know it's hard sometimes to be the person that's willing to go out there and say, I'm willing to ask a question, as long as the intent is this. See, the strongest place for us in public government to hinge ourselves to ground, to kind of sink in the grounding pole is in the mission of our organization, of our agency, of our city. It's in cities, it's a broader thing, but in this very particular special district, it's single purpose. You know what it is. And you have to ask yourself, does it serve? Will it be grateful? Will it benefit? Those are questions that you should always ask yourself as a board member. And when you say, I'm not sure, that's when you have to ask questions. It doesn't matter if there are 5 or 24. And now it's harder with 24 if everybody's got a question, if everybody's got a perspective they want to add, but most usually that's not the way it works. But you got to understand that there's not one of you that has more juice or authority here than any of the rest. I know your policy manual. I know that the chair has certain things that are vested to him or her for that time while they're serving as chair. They can do certain things. But other than that, nothing's unilateral. Now, that's the way it's supposed to be. No, none of you have more authority than the others. But all of you have responsibility and accountability to the public equally. This is the collaborative group, the team of decision makers is a concept that really has to be worked out, because which ones aren't different from the next? We're talking about people here. The most complex set of personality, culture, background, experience, all of you have, all gets entered into this equation that has so many variables, it's very difficult to figure out how this is going to go, how this is going to work out, how we're going to make decisions together. It is an interesting simile for it to be compared to a very complicated mathematical equation, because we're all so different. And you can't go to the next the San Mateo mosquito and vector control district and say, oh, well, they'll be about the same. They're not. They're completely different than you all. And so every group has to figure out their own dynamic. And some of you that have been around for a while in this particular agency, or you've been out in another agency, you've seen where the dynamic hasn't worked out so great. So we're always trying to work on how can the dynamic work for the good of the mission. So that's our topic, proven governance practices for boards, trustees that have been developed over the years. So let's think about governance. The way boards work together is called governance. There's a right way and there are many wrong ways. Now, is there just one right way? There are concepts that should be applied to any board. Yes, absolutely. Is there just a right way? I don't know, but I know there are many wrong ways. And it's about governing. This provide us a proven system of governing effectively. You'll be taking the course over the next few meetings. So this district provides critical services, correct? Now, it's important. What services does your district provide? Now, we know that. We've got it right up here, right? Well, integrated vector control management practices, but mosquitoes and vector-borne diseases, right? Mosquitoes and vector-borne diseases. Are there other things that we should put on the list? That's what it does, right? Anything else?
Education, yeah.
So
This district does a lot of education.
Yeah, information for people out there.
Schools.
At schools, yeah. But it focuses around that, right? Right? And probably the interaction with water and how water stays, flows, doesn't. How many people the district serves in this room? That's not worded right. How many people does the district serve at 760 something thousand? The question here is, are these services just important to your region and its people, or is it critical to them? Critical is important. The difference is, my spectrum that works most usually for me is critical, important, or nice to have. And this isn't just nice to have. This isn't just important. This is critical. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. And I know you all have that in mind. I know you all believe that. But keeping that in mind as you work through the way that governance is done with this group for this mission is the key to governance here. The foundations of effective governance are this. And I don't know if you can read that, so I may read some of these to you. Let me get down to it so I can read it. The governance team succeeds. Now so we talked earlier about principles that for a good board governance. And this is definitely one of those principles. The governance team succeeds with unity of purpose. So just to describe that a little bit, identify and appeal to shared values and perspectives. Obtain board consensus by starting with high-level issues and working down through details to merge various director perspectives or trustee perspectives for the best overall solution. That's just that's just applying your differing perspectives to any given decision. Ensure the process for gathering information and options for the presentation to the board is complete and represents all perspectives. This is don't let something go that hasn't been thoroughly examined. Now, it doesn't mean that that you're singularly responsible for every decision that gets made in terms of you applying yourself to it. But a lot of that is presumed to have happened prior to you getting there. That your differing viewpoints and questions on any particular decision have been answered with the staff report, or have been answered because I called Phil and he said, "Oh yeah, that's what's meant here. You're right. We've got that covered here in this paragraph or that," or in hearing from the public during a meeting, or in hearing from your colleagues during a meeting, and then you vote. Maybe then you'll get an opportunity before you vote to even give your perspective or ask some questions. And then focusing on representing the entire district rather than your group, agenda, or program. This is called the I to we. So there's more on this next, but a good board member all of us are individuals, all of us bring that that certain individual flair, perspective, value to this process. But as we get together as a group, how does that work? This I, individuals, you all drove here, to we now are in this together. We are in it to make sure that happens. And that is critical to those that we serve. So the individual director's attitude, which is the middle column here, is attitude and approach affects your board effectiveness. How you approach this work affects that. You have a clear understanding of the district and how it works, and what are some of certainly first, what is its mission? What is it supposed to do? How does it do that in some respects? What kinds of things do we do that actually help us accomplish the mission? And then you develop your own dialogue and deliberation. And this is personal, how you do it for you. And some of you you've been around in this board long enough to know that, well, on this particular agenda item, I know there's going to be some questions from this person or the other. That's because you've got that individual dialogue. You've got that individual knowledge that you've worked out. When I first got to the city council, I had no dialogue or means of deliberation at the time. Now, I looked at the agenda before I got there, but there were 22 of us that were applying for the position, and I didn't think my chances were very good. I know now I should have spent a lot more time with that agenda before I was up there making a decision. 20% of the decision for relatively important things. And so it was really important to me to recognize and respect different perspectives and styles. You all know that this can be a challenge because we all have a different perspective and style. Some of us can be very persuasive, some of us can be very quiet, some of us can be very deliberate, some of us can be very agitated, some of us can be very abrasive. But somehow we've got to collect that and work with it. And where the edges are, where the edge or the edge that drops off to real problems is right there, is respect. Respect for one another, and the fact that you've all been willing to put on this mantle and all been willing to be accountable for this. And each of you come from different places, but for the same reason. So the I becomes a we, and then you respect each other as such, because in some respects, it's easy to think that if I disrespect my colleague, I'm disrespecting the public, the public processes that has put them here. So I'm disrespecting my own public. They're all mine. I represent them all. And so it's important that this work. Now, that doesn't mean that some of our colleagues at times won't come up with harebrained ideas, or that our colleagues won't come up with perspectives that don't make any sense to me personally. That my colleague will say something in a way that's somewhat offensive. That my colleague will do something that doesn't seem to make any sense. That doesn't mean that won't happen, especially in a board of 24. I mean, the math just says that you will, at times, get those kinds of things. But how tolerant are we? How understanding are we? How able are we to process that with grace and efficiency in moving forward, in applying any perspective to them that is good for the mission, in giving the benefit of the doubt, and then being able to move on and respect that individual for whatever their perspective is really the key. Because if that falls apart, then lots of things fall apart. It's that slippery slope of a disrespectful, and let me tell you, you can be disrespectful with an eye roll. That's all it takes. Somebody says something, and you go, oh. How much is said with that one little nonverbal? And I know we've all seen it. We've probably all done it. And I remember a story that we had. Look, Tracy is a growing community. With growth comes issues. In residential growth comes lots of different perspectives. We had usually about 200 people in every meeting. We were live broadcast to the community, and when there were items from the audience, we called it, they lined up, and I was the mayor, so I called them up and then asked them to please. Well, it used to be I could ask for name and address. No longer do we really do that. But the point is that my wife would watch me at home, and when somebody's coming up that aisle, that they didn't show that. They showed me, my face, my big old face out there. And I get home from those meetings, and because there was one guy, right, that came every meeting and let us have it. Took his 3 minutes, was very respectful of the 3 minutes, but just boom, up and down the dais. Everybody, I'm in, calling us lots of different things. And I got home one night and Linda said, I can tell when he's coming up the aisle. I said, no, you can't. She goes, you should see your face. I said, oh, man. And see, in some respects, I'm disrespecting my whole community in doing that. And the same can happen, not only there, but it can happen here on the dais. When somebody's down there again talking about that same thing. We've talked about that. We've decided that even. But within this framework of process boundaries, they have a right to express within the framework that we've just collectively decided. And for me to disrespect that is disrespectful of my own community. And so I got taught by being on television that I have to be really careful of how I look here if I don't really mean to project disrespect. So it can happen. And so are we prepared for that? And how it's difficult at times. Sometimes it's just time and grade. I mean, if I hadn't have been caught on TV, I may have still been doing it when I left office. But I want to, and I've always tried to make sure that anyone in my class understood to govern with dignity and understand the implication of demeanor and behavior. And how you all are 24 of maybe a couple hundred leaders in this whole region. And the people of this district are relying on you all to make good decisions. And if you start disrespecting one another, you will not make as good decisions. Because the ideal is for everyone to be able to engage the decision. Is for everyone to be able to make it a better decision if they need to, if they choose to. And no one get left out, especially here in with your colleagues. That's difficult at times. That's hard. And it gets even more close to home when there's only 5 of you up there. I know some of you council members, there are times when you say, oh my goodness, my head's going to explode. But you represent your community. Do it with demeanor and behavior. Now, some would say, look, it doesn't matter. I should be able to express any way I want, anytime I want. Maybe you can, but as soon as you tear at the fabric of a group that needs to make not just a few decisions together, but hundreds of decisions together, as soon as you start tearing at that fabric, you're just testing it until it breaks. And when it breaks, it's hard to ever get that woven back together. And who loses when that happens? The public does. Because you make your best decisions when all 24 opinions and perspectives are applied to it. The expertise that you have in this room is incredible. So the board's responsibilities are this. Given this, here's your responsibilities. Hire and evaluate the CEO. Retain a legal counsel. Set the direction of the district. Provide resources. Engage with the wider community. As you said, engage, let people come and talk to you, engage with them, give them information, help them understand what some of the challenges are. Institutionalize effective governance policies and monitor and evaluate and revise for accountability. All this is the public's business. All this done in public, all of this for everyone to see. So how do we achieve unity of purpose and then therefore doing our jobs more effectively? And effectively, remember, is the gain you get from everyone's perspective rather than the loss you get in a torn internal relationship, or things that are done that tear that apart. I to we. Because you're in it together. You're the decision-making team that the public in a number of different ways is set aside to see to it that's done. And that's done right. And it's important to point out, not just in 1915, but in 2018, what about 2048? So you have the responsibility for the things that are in front of you now, but don't you in some respects have the responsibility with the way this is in the future? And so that's another difficult thing to look at in terms of how this all plays together. Fortunately, I think, for the most part, boards in the 50s and the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, right on up, did their job to the degree that they could and handed you off not a bunch of troubles, but a pretty healthy district. So they did what they had to do. They worked out their differences. They served when they had the burden. And future boards are depending on you to do the same. So your boards may not have a lot in common. It's the truth. Like I said, it's an arranged marriage. You may not know each other. You may have different beliefs, political background, political differences, work backgrounds. No doubt have different life experiences to be from different parts of these counties. Yet you must work together to become a single corporate body. And that's the challenge of this government. Because the way it looks is, and I just love the fact that these decisions here are made better by the perspective, the locales, the experience that you all have. Every decision that comes in front of you, you have the opportunity to do this. And you should continue to have the opportunity. And you don't do anything that limits your opportunity or anyone else's opportunity to engage in that decision and make it better. Every time. Every time. And so you come together as that singular board. So you have to overcome your differences. Unity of purpose is bigger than individual directors. The mission is bigger than individual directors. See, some of you will come and go. Many have come and gone. And the mission remains. The public out there churns and grows and gets bigger and smaller and goes and comes. But they all need this. They all need for this agency to do this well. See, it's more important than any disagreement on issues. So any disagreement, how does disagreement get processed, is really an important question for any decision-making group. How does discourse, debate, disagreement get processed? Is everybody respected in that process? Does everybody always have the opportunity in that process? Is it a transparent process? Is everybody getting the information at the same levels at the same time in that process? Because if this is going to be true, then that's got to be true. All those things have to happen. The process has to allow for this to be for us not to get it to the point where we disagree and jeopardize unity of purpose. Each one of you, in some respects, has to believe about the other one that you believe wholeheartedly in this. I presume that this is a perspective that we're hearing tonight for the first time that serves that. Because I can presume that, I give benefit of the doubt. I give credit to a new way of looking at things. I yield to somebody else's perspective relative to this decision. It is what leads you to assume that you'll all find a way to handle the disagreements. You're bound to disagree on things. You're bound to disagree on usually the bigger things. Processing that disagreement is really the mark of a great board, is one that can find a way to always process that disagreement. So here you are wanting to serve, and you have this great idea or this great background or this great experience, and then maybe you appeal to a board of somebody to be able to get appointed, and with your great idea, and you win. And now you're in office, and now your idea comes with your office or your perspective or your expertise. And then you get put on here with the others, maybe 4, maybe more. And they may share your thoughts or not. But this is your decision team. You don't have a choice now. It's the bunch you sit with. And so now what do? Well, you do this. And you can see, it's a group of 5, I realize, but for the illustration purposes. She says, I just thought I had a good idea. He said, well, no, there's a much better way of doing that. And she's saying, now, come on, can't we all just get along here? Now, this guy's really upset because he's always wanted to do this. And, of course, then there's another person who has a different way of again, any given issue, this can happen. So what's the outcome? Something completely different. None of them had that idea. All of them had different ideas, but they put them all together and they came up with that polished decision. The only way they were able to do that, when you get to this point where everyone's mildly okay. I remember I used to think, and I know some of you that have sat in boards before, you get dueling experts. And you'll get the expert with all the letters behind their name over here that says, you've got to, this is the only way. If you don't do it, this will happen. And then you get the other expert with the same letters behind their name that says, you cannot do that. If you do that, it'll mean this. And so somehow you all have to make the decision. And it's at that point where you say, if I can send everybody out of the room a little bit upset, I probably have hit that magic middle ground. I tell you, that probably had to have happened to me over the 23 years I was there, 4 or 5 times. Because different sides, you have to collect all that information and process through it and work through it, and then your own individual ideas. But everyone's mildly okay. Everyone's okay that, hey, look at this. We worked out that elegant solution from this to this. Doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes there's somebody over here that's kind of marginalized that says, oh, I didn't really like that decision. Maybe, but does that mean it wasn't the right decision? Oftentimes we disagree with decisions that are made, and how we process that difference is important. How we individually process that difference. Have you ever heard anybody say, well, I know that they decided that, but I didn't vote for it? Well, who's under the bus on that discussion? The rest of the decision-making team. Why? Because I didn't want to be under the bus with them. I didn't agree with it. It's okay not to agree. This is not about uniformity. This is about unity of purpose and processing the differences between us. And at the end of the day, we have such a robust, fair, and open process of making decisions that everyone gets to engage. No one's left out. There are no eye rolls with the odd, obtuse comment. No one takes personal shots at one another. Because it's too important that this team be able to make the next agenda item's decision unfettered by that one. If we fettered with each other, if we messed with each other every time we made a decision, how far into the decision process where we'd all be just messing with each other so much that we couldn't make any decisions together? And so it's important for us to, it gets back to that respect for one another. Respect for the public process that put them there. Working the decision process and then coming out with a decision. You're effective when you help the board reach a majority vote. You're effective when you help the board reach a majority vote. So is that always true? Because it might happen with or without you. You might be part of that majority, you might not. But are you effective when you've represented your public? Are you effective? Because the presumption is that each of you are here because you were interested, or somebody picked you up and said, that person really needs to be on that board, or for some other really good reason. And the presumption is that that reason is going to be applied here, and that you will be able to somehow work with the rest of them that are appointed as well. You're appointed as an individual, but you serve as a team. You do not have any authority in an individual to fix the problems you champion. Your authority powers as an individual are limited. Your success as a board member is tied to the success of your board, its ability to make decisions, and your ability to represent your feelings relative to that decision. Pro or con. You're feeling so strongly about the process and my ability to engage in the process and my ability or non-ability to convince a majority of my position. See, everyone's position is represented at that point. Your own individual position on any particular item is represented at that point, and your ability to package that in a compelling way is your responsibility. It's not anybody else's. It's yours. And others may feel the same way. Glad you brought it up. That's a good way of looking at it. I like that. Or they might say, that's just not the way I feel about it. Okay, let's talk. Let's see if there isn't some way that we can look at this, and you start polishing that rock, the decision rock. It's another metaphor I have in mind. So you start, and that's how it works. But it never gets disrespectful. It never gets insulting. It never gets. It gets difficult because people don't like conflict these days. People are really conflict averse. But this process really allows for conflict. It's how can you functionally conflict is the question. Can we mix it up? Representing our perspective and still come to a decision and respect the process so much that whether I'm for or against the way the decision was made individually at first, I still feel good about it. Because I know our process is strong. Everyone gets the opportunity to polish that rock. Everyone gets an opportunity to convince their colleagues that this is the right way to go. And you either make that case or you don't. And the board makes a decision. And you move on. Remember, every board that's together for about 4 years has to make about 200 decisions together. So the public needs for you to make decision number 200 as unfettered as decision number 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And so it's important that we can functionally conflict. Again, this isn't about unity of decisions. This is about unity of a group, not uniformity of decision. No one hands you, here's how you're going to vote on the way in the room. And I don't sense that this group is like that anyway. There are some groups we know like that. You know, the issuing of a rubber stamp on the way in the door. Oh, that's not here. So unity doesn't mean uniformity or forced agreement. Unity is a shared commitment to the work together to serve the public. With what? With this mission right here. Uses harmony of opinion to form consensus, and that's kind of a soft word, but it does use harmony of opinion. Harmony of opinion, harmonies are maybe different notes that work together. A consensus which is agreeable within a group without sacrificing the uniqueness of each member. And that's really important. I don't want anybody leaving here thinking that you've kind of got to agree here. You don't have to agree. How you process your disagreement is important. What you do with that disagreement later is important. Whether or not you still respect the team when you leave here is important. And so that's why process is so critical to this. If the process that you use is so well put together, so well instrumented, and everyone gets their chance, then there's a vote. And after that vote, any vote's a good vote because the majority has decided. That's the process. That's how it works. You've had your chance. Maybe you'll get another chance to state your opinion. Uniformity harmonizes all members of the group by destroying the uniqueness of each member. That's not at all what we're out here, to conform to a single pattern. Which unification or unity or conformity does this team strive for? That's a good question. You should all ask yourselves, which one do we strive for? I don't know that, just because the chair reads an agenda item and reads, and there's a staff report that says, here's what we've got, and maybe there's even a staff recommendation, doesn't mean that you don't have good questions and good perspective and maybe an opposition to something. Again, how you process it and what you do with it is what's critical here. It worked. Be together, not the same. 88 keys, and I don't know about the rest of you, but when I sit in front of the 88 keys, they look like 88 separate, unique, uncoordinated, never to be somehow tied together like that. Each one's different. They're not the same, but they're together. And so it's kind of an illustration of how a big board like this can be. Process steps your board can take to build a unity of purpose. There are 4 of these. Talk about each of them pretty quickly here. Identify and appeal to the shared values and perspective around purpose. Around this purpose, the purpose that is your mission. Don't forget that. Obtain board consensus by starting with high-level issues and working down through the details and merge. Ensure the process of gathering information. We've read these before. Focus on your representing the entire district, then your group, agenda, or program, I to we. So, just in terms of the value is a common belief and sense of importance. Cost of living raises should be consistent with those of other organizations in our county. See how it goes from a concept down to wow, that's a real question. That's a real position. Is that something that needs to be looked at? You've probably thought about these before. Perspective, it's a noun. A common way of looking at things, a guiding principle, an approach, a conceptual point of view. CEO evaluation should be based on total organization performance. So these things start big as conceptual things, and then they get right down into where we live, into what we do, and what we have to do, and the kinds of decisions we are going to make, and the kinds of principles and the kinds of basis that we're going to use to be able to make our decisions and be able to make sure that our organization is indeed cost effective, indeed environmentally responsible. So we recognize how those can affect our decision making. It is so subtle that most boards don't regard their selection of facts as a choice after all the facts are facts. This is the box that we so often say we want to think outside of. We say we want to think outside the box, but we can oftentimes get within the box and not allow ourselves to think outside of it. And that you are not only do you individually, but your process has to allow for some out of the box. Values and perspectives are invisible forces that affect decision making. They do. Remember I said decision filters earlier. Decision filters are what we all apply to the work that we do every time we're there. And so what should one of your decision filters be? How does it advance and protect this mission? Oh, here's another one. This one I need to somehow, I have to hit the play on that one. I have to. Yeah, just hover over it, and I think it comes up.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it looks like it's coming up.
Just, yeah, there you go. So this is coming together. Now watch this.
Keep the loudness.
I'm sorry it's a little grainy, I know. It's very grainy. There's a team of people. Board's getting together. The board's starting to convene. There's the board sitting around the table. And then the chair. Boy. This board is really committed to the mission. You see what I'm getting at here? That board came together and the look on their faces, I know it's a game. I know it's a different kind of a mission, but is it really any different? Of a bunch of people that came from different places on the island, and the boys that played when they were kids, they came together, said this is, and they take that time to do what's called the haka. They take the time to get zeroed in on the purpose. And they make sure everybody knows it. And they would no sooner throw one another under the bus as not play at all. I mean, these people are committed to that. I love that tone of being committed to something, and what are we committed to? That. Every time we get together, that's what we're thinking. Not only to protect it, but to advance it. And it's not easy. And we will have differing perspectives. And we will have different ways to look at things. But processing that and the way that we process it will protect the way we can do it from one decision to the next right on down. So we resolve disagreements by evaluating all concerns and perspectives from a high position, from values down through details. the larger question and more likely is that difference can be resolved. That's important. For instance, it's easier to agree that preventing disease through vector control is good and is our mission, yeah? Then we should spend the equivalent of $5 per home to spray an approved pesticide to kill disease-carrying mosquitoes. This is a concept, this is a particular directive. And so if you're going to stay in terms of values and high-end positions, this would be that. Once you get down to here, you've got, you can see where everybody can agree with this pretty much. Down here, not so sure. Maybe it's $6, maybe it's $4. And so how you do that, how you get to that point, if you would even come up with something like this, it's just a concept. But you see how important it is, because if you start drawing lines around things, there will be differences. Does it really matter how much it costs? And that's hard. That's a hard concept to conceptualize. Yes, it matters, but we've got to do that. So we've all got to get smart together and understand. Now, will we all agree at the end of the day? Probably not. It turns out to, I'm just, again, just following this example. So we agree on $5.56, or we agree on whatever it might be. But the fact is, though, is that everyone gets to engage in that. Everyone's perspective, everyone's viewpoint of why this goes up, this goes down. In order to do this, we do this, and why it goes up, goes down. Everyone gets heard. Every individual input is valuable. So, promote healthy dialogue and differences. Start by agreeing on broad set of issues and then resolve the sub-issues. Then when a vote is taken, it's not important that it be unanimous, because the process is so amenable to different ideas that everyone's had their chance. Everyone's had the opportunity to affect that decision. But it's critical that after a final vote is taken to support the board's position. Why? Because I believe in the process. How can I support it when I wasn't for it in the first place and I voted no? How can I support it? Because the process is worth supporting. I had my opportunity. I did my best. I did my homework. I presented my homework to the board. We talked about it. Everyone listened. We had discourse and debate, and then we had a vote. And because that process is so good, the outcome is more valuable than me telling somebody at the grocery store that I didn't vote for that. And so, if that's the big pull here, the big challenge, is being able to get to that point where your process is so valuable, where the teamwork of you being together is so important, and you know that while this decision didn't come out my way, the next one might, or at least I'll have the opportunity to engage, and my perspective will not go unheard, is worth more than my ability or my insistence that my way was the only way. So, ensure the process for gathering, presenting information, identifying, that's about the process. And there's a couple of different references there for you as well. Representing the entire district by transitioning from I to we. Individual opinions and perspectives and subgroups and issues are important, but must be voiced in context of the entire district. This is really an important thing for a group like yours, because individual directors must balance individual beliefs by developing consensus in service of the entire community. Remember, we talked about the 760,000, or is it that you feel like you represent a subset of that? The fact is, when you get named to a board like this, you represent them all. And that is usually the expectation of those who tell you, who appoint you. You even have policy stating as much. Here's your own policy. Exercise our independent judgment on behalf of the interest of the residents, property owners, and public as a whole district in furthering the purposes of the intent of the Health and Safety Code. Represents the interest of the public as a whole and not solely the interest of the Board of Supervisors or the City Council by or from which they were appointed. The difference is here is, are you a delegate or a representative? A delegate, and it's a very fine difference here, but a delegate is a person designated to act for or present another or others' opinion. A representative is a person or thing that represents another or others. And see, a representative is that you represent the entire. A delegate would be that your council sends you with a particular position. You're not delegates, you are representatives. That's this form of government. And as such, it's hard at times because you feel like, well, the citizens that I represent, well, if you ever say that out loud, or if you say that to yourself, you have to ask yourself, well, who is that? The citizens that you represent is the entirety, even though you come from a particular place. And that's one of the hardest things to do, especially for a mayor and council members, because you feel like, and you know, a lot of you are on other kind of boards and regional things too. When you go regional, you take off the city hat completely and put on their regional hat. It's hard to be complete in that, but that's the expectation. Rarely does a council or a board of supervisors or any particular person that's going to send you out to do something say, and we want you to vote this way. But it's an important distinction. So here are the 4 ways. The summary's next. We're almost done tonight. Thank you for bearing with me. So what you do here is mission critical. It's critical what you do. Governance is demonstrated by you is how the public is represented for these services. Demonstrated by you is how the public is represented for these services. You are any number of ways you can do this. Remember, I described some of the harsh, difficult ways that boards like this can interact, where it becomes something other than what the public expects. The public is best served and represented when you agree on the unity of purpose, that you all say, look, I can put up with just about any of my colleagues' input because I know that they have this in mind. That requires you to have an I to we mindset in the process to back it up. I can't overemphasize the process. You serve them all, not just your specific community. And the next training is in November on the 14th. I know it's a long evening. I thank you for bearing with me. It's hard to know just how long these things are going to take sometimes. I think we've gone a little over, but I want to thank you all for your service. You know, I hope you wrote down some questions, and maybe you can ask and we can talk about at the beginning of the next session. And we'll go into this a little deep more. We go on, but from this, it's not the same concepts that we discussed tonight. But I hope you have some questions and thoughts, and this is thought-provoking for you in terms of your governance and your representation here. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.